You guys really enjoyed that video that I did on squelches in Vital, so today I want to do the same video but for acid sounds. Here I am in one of my production projects. I just kind of took an area where I have nothing else in there and we are just going to make like an acid sequence for this part here. Before that though, I do quickly want to go over the theory of acid sounds. And the way that we're going to do that is with this setup here. This is just an instance of Vital going through an oscilloscope so that we can look at the waveform. So let's just start with the initialized preset. I'm going to play a note here. You can see I'm playing G#1 here, and you'll see that the waveform is going to show up if I do so. Now I think most people know actually how an acid sound is made, what the core component of an acid sound is. It is the magical filter that is on top of there with the high resonance, which is going to be modulated over the sound. But I don't think a lot of people know why this actually makes an acid sound. So today I want to figure that out. Let's just start by looking at what the waveform is doing when we slide this filter around. And what you'll see is that this resonance is emphasizing a single harmonic. You can see that in the waveform. Notice that individual sine wave kind of changing in pitch. You can see it going faster and slower. Unfortunately, I don't think that there's a way for me to freeze this, but I hope that you can catch that while I was playing it. And that is essentially what is happening in an acid sound, only really fast. So let's set up our modulation. I'm going to use envelope 2 for that because I don't want to actually change the amplitude of the sound, which is tied to envelope 1 here. And I'm just going to assign this to the frequency. And let's just set this down a little bit so that the range is kind of like in the middle here. And we can see the sine wave kind of moving down slowly. Also, you can already hear the kind of character that is commonly associated with an acid sound. Now, before we continue, I do quickly want to say that if you want to support this channel, make sure that you like the video and that you're subscribed. Also, check out my products on Gumroad, like my sample packs and my preset packs, as well as my Patreon page where you can get early access to videos, priority in feedback streams, and many more benefits. With that being said, let's get back into the video. Now we can increase or decrease the amount of emphasis that we're bringing on this individual harmonic, on this individual sine wave, by turning the resonance higher or lower. So you'll notice that if I bring it higher, that the sine wave peaks out more and that we get more of that sine wave effect. And we can actually make use of this if we wanted to have a little bit more impact by also modulating the resonance amount. So let's go up a little bit. I don't want to go into that very high part. As you could see, that was kind of overpowering the actual saw wave. That's not what we want. We just want a little bit more of that sine wave at the beginning. I already get a very nice acid sound. Now, one effect that is commonly associated with this acid sound is a nice bit of distortion. What that is going to do is it's going to generate overtones for the harmonic that we're accentuating here. So let's just enable the distortion here and let's drive it a little bit to see what we can get. Different forms of distortion are going to give you different types of sounds, but one that I really like is just like a simple hard clipper where you drive it a lot. And you get some really nice gritty sounds out of that. Now another key thing is the octave that you're playing at. I'm just going to play it at a bunch of different octaves so that you can get an idea of the sound. You can hear that the kind of quality of the sound stays the same, but you get a little bit of extra brightness if you play a higher octave and a little bit of extra like darkness because we're playing lower frequencies if you play a lower octave. Now this brings us into the sequence itself. When it comes to acid lines for Psytrance, what is usually the case is that you'll have something revolving around a 1-bar sequence. So let's say that we make a bit of a rhythm here. I'm just going to go with a very simple rhythm like this, and I'll duplicate that over. And let's just hear what this sounds like. You get a very basic rhythm. Let's go down a couple of octaves. Maybe like that. And obviously, something like this is a little bit boring. What tends to happen is that every note of the 16 note is played. That is almost like a key distinction of the old 303 that used to be very famous for acid sounds. In fact, I think that that's where the sound originated from that individual synthesizer. And the way that you would sequence that, you would basically be not forced into doing it, but it would be very common that all of the 16 notes would be played. One of the things that I like to do is for the notes that aren't part of the main rhythm is to lower them by an octave. In this case, I've made them a little bit shorter. I'm also going to make these a little bit shorter so that they don't touch the next note. But essentially, we can just fill in the space with some of these lower notes here. What might be a good idea for these lower notes is to slightly lower the volume. And we're going to do that with the velocity. Let's go back into Vital and just quickly assign the velocity to the level here. And you can hear that our main rhythm notes are standing out, both because they're an octave higher, but also because they're a little bit louder, and therefore they hit the distortion a little bit harder as well. Now, obviously, what we have right now is a little bit boring. There isn't really a lot of excitement to it. What you could do is play with the melody a little bit. Let's go 3 up and 5, just as an example. Let's go maybe down here by 2 semitones. What might also be nice is to divide this up even more. If you're saying like this lower part is a little bit boring here, what we can do is actually take some of these and lower them an octave more. So you'll get something like this maybe. Maybe let's do one more here. And obviously you can play around with the melodies and the rhythms that you're using here. It's going to depend on what the track needs. Now, when it comes to post-processing, there is a few things that I like to do generally on my acid sounds, mainly extra distortion. I just think that the distortion that we're bringing in here with the Vital isn't enough to really bring it out. What this is going to achieve is going to give you a little bit more of a modern sound because you're strafing away a little bit more of what the original 303 was able to do. What I like to do is run it through a guitar pedal emulation. In this case, it is the fuzz here, the MDMX fuzz. And you can really hear that this just brings out the grit and the higher frequencies of the sound. Obviously, we have to tweak this a little bit to get the exact sound that we want. I think it may be a little bit too extreme. Also, I tend to like this other type a little bit more. Maybe something like that. And one of the things that we do have to do is to take care of the lower frequencies of the sound. Because we're playing such low octaves, in fact, these are in the sub-bass register, we have to remove those lower frequencies because we don't want them to clash with other elements, mainly the kick and bass. Also, I just think that right now with the sound that we have, they're really clogging up in a general sense. Even if there wasn't any other sounds to play with them, I would still remove them because it sounds like very dark and very nasally, and I don't really like that texture. So in terms of EQing, I'll probably end up doing something like this. Trying to bring that grit out a little bit more. This is interesting because this is a lot higher than the filter is going to go, so you're only going to get material that is here because of the distortion. There's not actually any part of the initial saw wave coming here because the filter doesn't really open up to that part. The filter only opens up to like this part over here. So all of the stuff that you're seeing in the higher frequencies here is generated through the distortion and saturation. So all of the stuff that you see in the higher frequencies here is generated through that hard clipping as well as the fuzz pedal. Finally, in terms of the processing, you can never go wrong with a little bit of ping pong delay and a little bit of reverb. So let's set those up, something like this maybe. That might be a bit too much feedback. And I'll slightly lower the high frequencies so that that doesn't clog up. And then in terms of reverb, I'll go with like a small room. Because we're playing a sequence here that is basically continuously playing, we don't really want like a very large reverb on this. We just want something that kind of adds a little bit of extra dimension, a little bit of extra space to it. You can hear that for both the delay and the reverb, I had to dial back the dry wet because I don't really want those sounds to stand out. I just want to bring a little bit of extra texture into the sequence. The main sound that you should be hearing is still the melody because that's what you should be focusing on. That's also the reason why I decided to lower this. In fact, I would maybe lower it even more, maybe like 4.4 here. And now we can hear that the main melody is still coming through and it's really coming out. So now let's say that you're happy with this sound and you're happy with this melody. To be honest, I'll probably end up changing the sound and the melody a little bit. Maybe I'll remove it completely for this track. But let's for now just say that we are, and we're just going to duplicate it over. The main thing that you're going to want to do is have this move, because right now it's just completely static. It doesn't have any movement to it, so it's going to sound fairly boring after a couple of rotations. What you can also do is change up the melody a bit. Maybe say that you want to do something like this, where you turn it into a 4-bar melody. And here we go, maybe like this, just up a little bit more so that we get this extra accentuation here by virtue of it being higher than any of the notes played previously. And we're just going to duplicate that over a couple of times so that you get something like this. Now comes the magic, and that is going to be the movement. What I'm going to do is just assign a macro to this filter. In terms of the movement amount, you generally want to be fairly low here. One, because this filter still needs to have a lot of range to it. And when you're going into the much higher frequencies, it's not going to sound the best. Here you can hear that we're starting to lose that acid quality. And you can hear that it basically just turns into a saw wave. So to remedy this, what we can do is just turn this frequency down a little bit. And you're going to get something like that. In terms of the movement, I might go for something simple like this, where it just goes down over the first half and then up over the second half. I'm going to lower its volume a little bit so that you can hear it in the context of the kick and bass, and then you'll get something like this. Now, obviously, there's going to be a lot more that you can do with this. You can add extra effects, you can add extra modulations, you can just make it a lot more interesting, but these are going to be the basics. So that's going to be it. I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.